Is started.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thanks for joining. It's nice to see some familiar names and faces. Starting to get to recognize those over these last few months. Um, so, just like usual, a few housekeeping reminders to go over um, before we get started. If you If you can, please just keep your microphone on mute until the Q&A portions of the webinar. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, you can type them in the chat and we'll answer them. To find the chat feature in your Zoom window, look for the chat or the speaking bubble icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. Depending on your device, you may have to hover over the bottom of the screen. The chat default, excuse me, the chat does default to all webinar participants or everyone in the to field. So to send a direct message to one individual, click the down arrow after everyone and select the specific participant. And then if you need or want captions, you can enable these by finding the CC or show captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Again, if you don't see the CC or show captions, you may need to hover over the bottom of the screen. Or additionally, look for the more or the three dots icon, and then click that button to enable the captions. So welcome to tonight's webinar, Getting Ready to Preserve. This webinar will cover a variety of equipment needed for different food preservation methods, with an emphasis on how these contribute to the safety of your value-added and home-preserved foods. During the January, February, and March webinars, we set the stage for safe food preservation by discussing pathogens that can contaminate food and cause foodborne illness, what pathogens need to grow, and how your actions can impact this growth, and then best practices for a thorough sanitation routine. In case you were unable to join us for one of those previous webinars, Lauren is sharing a link to the playlist on our YouTube channel in the chat. Then starting in May, this webinar series will begin a deep dive into different food preservation methods, during which we'll apply information from these first 4 webinars in the series. So I'm Amy Johnston. I am today's speaker. I'm a regional extension educator on our food systems team at University of Minnesota, working in the area of food safety. And joining us tonight is Lauren Backus, who's here to assist with any technical difficulties. You can direct message Lauren in the Zoom chat if you're experiencing any problems. She'll also be sharing links and information in the chat throughout the webinar. The topics we'll be covering tonight focus on getting you ready to preserve and not so much the actual food preservation processes. So we'll start off by talking about safe recipes. We'll review equipment and packaging supplies needed for freezing, drying, or dehydrating, and fermenting. And then we'll spend a good amount of time going over different types of canners and their uses and appropriate jars and lids. Then we'll wrap up with highlighting some equipment that is not recommended for safe canning. I'll stop for questions after each food preservation method. So whether you're joining us to benefit your food business or you just want to learn more, I hope you leave this webinar with increased confidence in your ability to prepare safe, preserved foods and prevent foodborne illness. Using safe recipes and the appropriate equipment are an essential part of safe food preservation. At the end of the webinar, you'll know where to search for safe recipes, be able to generate a list of equipment or supplies you need to safely perform the food preservation method or methods you select, and lastly, have the confidence to identify or question the safety of certain equipment or supplies when you make your decisions. So let's begin. What is food preservation? In the simplest view, food preservation is a process that stops or delays the ripening of a food and minimizes the ability of pathogens to survive and or grow on the food. Both of these then prevent the spoilage and waste of food because it has a longer shelf life and can be used at a later time. There are many food preservation methods such as freezing, dehydrating or drying, fermenting, pickling, curing and smoking, canning, pasteurization, and freeze drying, just to name a few. Each one of these methods minimizes the risk of harmful pathogen growth by controlling one or more of those factors that we reviewed in February. So just a quick refresher, pathogens need a food source, which is that food that's about to be preserved. They can survive and grow in an environment that has the right acidity or pH, adequate moisture, and the right amount of oxygen. Pathogens will grow in the temperature danger zone. And if the conditions are right and given enough time, they can grow to levels that can cause foodborne illness. Today, we're going to discuss the general equipment and packaging needed to safely perform different food preservation methods. And then again, over the next several months, we'll discuss the different food preservation processes in detail. As you begin to plan to preserve foods either for sale or for your home use, ask yourself a few questions. What and how much product do I have to preserve? What's the intended use of the final product? For example, you'll probably use dehydrated fruits differently than you would canned fruits. What do you think will sell? How much space do you have for storage? What equipment do you already have? And what are you willing or able to invest in? And then probably the most important, ask yourself, do I have safe recipes? There are recipe tips, tricks, hacks everywhere you look when searching for food preservation methods. So how do you know what recipes or methods are safe? These are sources of research-based tested recipes. So we have the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, education institutions like extension offices, and Ball publications from 1994 are newer, such as the Ball Blue Book or the Complete Book of Home Preserving. All of these recipes are based on scientific research-based practices. Did you know if you're going to be searching online for any of these sources or for recipes, you can filter your searches to only or prioritize web pages that are from education or institutional sources. So you would open up your search engine, so maybe Google, you'll type in your question or your phrase. So in this example, fermenting at home, space, site, .edu. And what that site .edu does is it tells the search engine to filter up all of those web pages that have that domain. So it's a good way to put those blogs and questionable sources at the bottom of your search. So over the next few months, as we focus on a variety of food preservation methods, you'll learn what food safety controls should be included in a safe recipe. For example, in May, we'll be talking about jellies, jams, and other sweet fruit spreads. So during next month's webinar, I'll share with you what to look for in the ingredients and why certain ingredients have critical functions for safety and quality. And then the same with the steps in the preparation. We'll again point out those ones that are critical to that safety and quality. And then that same approach will be used in June when we're talking about pickling and so forth. So for now, knowing that these sources of safe recipes are available, They're a good place to start for you to get familiar to review and get familiarity with the different recipes. And while there are a lot of good research-based tested recipes available, what if you have a family recipe that's been passed down from generation to generation, or you want to create your own? The simplest way is to follow a safe substitutions guideline. So Lauren is sharing in the chat a safe substitution guideline document that was put together by a few different extension offices. And then, however, if you want to get really creative, you can develop your own recipes using the principles you'll learn over the coming months, and then have your recipe and product tested in a food lab. And that food lab will review the recipe and test the product for things like water activity or pH. Okay, so freezing. Freezing preserves food by temporarily stopping the growth of any pathogens that are present and pausing ripening enzyme process in very cold temperatures. Freezing turns that water that is present in the food into ice, which pathogens cannot use to promote growth. Before freezing many vegetables, it's important to blanch them to promote safety and quality of the final product. You can blanch vegetables in boiling water or by steaming. Steaming can help me retain more vitamins and nutrients than boiling for many vegetables. To steam, you can use a collapsible steamer basket and insert that into the pot, or use a kit that has the insert into the pot, or use an electric steamer. An electric steamer could be a good investment for a food business, as you would be able to steam larger quantities in a shorter period of time because you're not waiting for a large quantity of water to boil. If you're using an electric steamer, use perforated pans to allow the steam to penetrate the food from all sides. For quality, it's important to freeze food in packaging that limits or prevents the flow of air and moisture in and out of the packaging. These type of packaging would be called non-permeable. Non-permeable packaging will reduce the risk of ice crystal formation, picking up of odors, and freezer burn. They might also be called moisture vapor resistant. The size of the package can have an impact on the safety of the final product, especially if you don't have access to a blast freezer. When freezing foods, we want to get them as cold as quickly as possible to minimize the growth of any pathogens that could be present. Foods that are completely frozen quickly will also have a better quality. It's recommended to use packaging that holds 1/2 gallon or less. Packaging materials can include non-permeable plastic bags that might be described as freezer safe, rigid plastic containers with a tight fitting lid. This is an example of a container where the lid locks into place. Your standard canning glass jars and lids are also a good option for freezing. This glass has been tempered, and tempering is a process that allows the glass to undergo extreme temperature exposure without breaking. So look for descriptions like dual purpose, made for canning and freezing. They should also have a tight fitting lid. So again, the standard two-piece lid from a mason type jar is a good option. And then vacuum packaging using appropriate bags is another option. This is just an example of a household size vacuum sealer. There's a variety of different sizes depending on the volume that you're trying to package. If you're thinking about vacuum packaging in your food business, there are certain safety requirements that you must meet. So if you are looking to vacuum package and sell your foods, just please reach out for more information. And all of these packaging materials prevent or limit the amount of air or moisture that can pass from the freezer into the package, promoting a safe and quality product. So any questions about freezing before we jump to the next method?
Not seeing anything in the chat so far.
Okay. So next is dehydrating or drying. So dehydrating or drying food preserves it by removing some or the majority of water from the food in a heat and humidity controlled environment. When the water activity of the food is lowered to that 0.85 or below, the risk of pathogen growth is minimized because the pathogens are unable to access the water that they need to survive and grow. Foods can be dehydrated using electric dehydrators, an oven, and some foods can be dried using a microwave or letting them air dry. Electric dehydrators will have a heating element to control the temperature and a fan and vents to control the airflow and the humidity. Some features to consider to include if you're purchasing a device is one that has a dial for regulating temperature. So meats are going to need to be dehydrated at a much higher temperature than produce to minimize the amount of time that food is spent in the temperature danger zone. A timer with an automatic shutoff to prevent scorching, and also looking for ones that have that UL seal of approval because that indicates these materials, the materials used to construct the unit are durable, they're resistant to corrosion, and they can be cleaned and sanitized easily. You can find small units that have as few as 3 or 4 trays, and then much, much larger options. An oven can be used to dry foods, but it can take longer than an electric dehydrator. Using the convection setting on an oven is better because it turns on the fan, which helps move around the air and even remove moisture from inside that oven. And cracking the oven door open just a few inches to allow moisture to escape can help as well. When packaging dehydrated or dried foods, the safety and quality are maintained by preventing moisture from coming in contact with the food. Packaged foods in non-permeable bags or containers like we discussed during freezing. Again, vacuum packaging is an option. This is an example of another type of jar that would be appropriate for storing dried foods. The lid has a rubber gasket built into it to help improve the seal. The size of the package can also impact the safety and quality, as every time the package is opened, air and moisture can then re-enter that package and can get trapped inside that sealed container. So use packaging sizes that make sense for the intended use of the product. You can also put a desiccant inside the package. A desiccant is in highlighted in the blue box on the screen, and it will absorb either moisture or oxygen within that food or within that container. So make sure to use a food grade desiccant. And then just a quick note about sun drying. Sun drying can be challenging in Minnesota. Sun drying requires a minimum temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit and a humidity below 60%. So while our temperatures may get above 85 degrees, the humidity tends to range between the mid 60s to the mid 70%. However, if you are able to successfully do it, just know additional steps need to be used to prevent contamination from birds or pests or other animals to make sure you don't have any contamination. Any questions on drying or dehydrating?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat so far.
Okay. Then we'll move into fermentation. So fermentation preserves food by preventing the growth of harmful pathogens in an acidic environment and promoting the growth of good or beneficial bacteria that compete for resources. So the good or the beneficial bacteria produce carbon dioxide, during their metabolic processes. So it's important to use an appropriate vessel when fermenting foods. The vessel should allow the carbon dioxide to leave and minimize the amount of oxygen that's entering the space. So stone crocks, glass containers, or food grade plastic containers are all ideal for fermentation. A general guideline is a 1 gallon container is large enough to hold and ferment 5 pounds of fresh vegetables. So a 2 gallon crock would be sufficient for 10 pounds of fresh vegetables, and a 5 gallon crock would be good for 25 pounds of fresh vegetables. For fermenting vegetables like cabbages or cucumbers, the vegetables need to be kept 1 to 2 inches under the brine. So a weight and a cover are needed. Mini fermentation kits will, like the one on the screen, will come with weights that can be used to hold the vegetables below the brine. If you aren't using a fermentation kit, you can use a small plate that fits inside your vessel and then weigh that plate down with a sealed jar of water, or something else that is heavy that can be cleaned and sanitized. Additionally, the vessel opening should be covered. Depending on what you are fermenting, this could be a fermentation lid or layers of cheesecloth. This prevents potential contamination and lets that carbon dioxide escape. This is an example of a fermentation lid with an airlock. And then this is an example of several layers of cheesecloth covering a fermented beverage. And then once that final fermented product is reached, that fermented food should be stored in the refrigerator to prevent any further fermentation. If that fermentation were to continue in a tightly sealed container, that tightly sealed container could rupture. Any questions on fermentation?
Looks like there's just one comment. Somebody had heard you should not use a crock made prior to 1975 due to lead used in the paint to glaze the inside of the crock.
Yeah, I believe that is the right year. I can confirm that. And when I'll put that in the notes in the follow-up email, but yes, using ones that could have had that lead paint. It would not be good.
And I don't see any other questions so
Okay,
far.
great. Well, then let's move into canning, because that's where the bulk of our information tonight is. So canning might require the most equipment. Canning and processing is used to make shelf-stable preserved foods like jams and jellies, pickled produce, canned fruits and vegetables, and canned proteins. So depending on the product, the acidity or water activity, all those are all different ways to minimize pathogen growth. In all canning methods, an aerobic environment is created. So remember, an anaerobic environment is created. Remember, an anaerobic environment has little or no oxygen present inside the jar. So an anaerobic environment inhibits the growth of many pathogens, but it's also ideal for some. Remember back to the January webinar during which we reviewed 9 different pathogens. An essential step in canning is the heat processing. The heat processing is important in killing of pathogens, but it's also important for creating a vacuum and that tight seal on the jars. Using the correct canner and appropriate supplies are essential in making preserved canned foods. So over the next several minutes, we'll spend time discussing each one of these pieces: the boiling water bath canner, the atmospheric steam canner, pressure canner. We'll talk about the anatomy of jars and lids, and then we'll review a few other utensils that can make canning a little bit easier. So a boiling water canner is appropriate for canning and processing acidic foods. Acidic foods are those foods with a pH of 4.6 or less. This method is used to process pickled or acidified vegetables, many fruits, salsas, and other acidified sauces. Lauren is sharing a link to a document from Clemson University that lists the pH of many produce items, so you have an idea of which ones could be canned using this method. The illustration on the screen shows the required pieces or parts of a boiling water canner. A boiling water canner is typically made of stainless steel, aluminum, or enamel, and it's tall enough to allow for enough water to cover the jars by 1 to 2 inches, and then have an additional 1 to 2 inches above that water line to allow space for that water to boil and not spill out. It also must have a tight fitting lid. The bottom must be flat to ensure there's even heating, especially if you're using an electric burner. A rack or perforated tray is put into the bottom of the canner to allow for the hot water to circulate around all the sides of the jars. This way you don't get any cold spots. And the canner should not extend over the burner by more than 2 inches. So if you're purchasing a canner, it's important to first measure your largest burner. So here's just a few examples of what can be used. The blue pot is, this blue enamel pot is an example of a boiling water canner. It comes in a kit with all of the pieces, like the rack and some other of the other tools. If you have a large enough pot with a tight fitting lid and it has a flat bottom, you can use that. You don't need to buy a specific canner. You do need to make sure that a rack can fit inside of that large pot. And again, it needs to be deep enough to allow for enough water to cover the cans by 1 to 2 inches, and then an additional 1 to 2 inches above that water line. And the image on the bottom is just showing an example of just that. There are electric boiling water canners that are just countertop devices that can be used for canning and processing acidic foods. Pay attention to the name and the function description of these devices because they're not one and the same as pressure cookers. And we'll talk more about this later when we review equipment that is not recommended for canning. So an atmospheric steam canner, or a lot of times just called a steam canner, is also appropriate for canning and processing acidic foods. So those foods with a pH of 4.6 or less. The only caveat here is the processing time needs to be 45 minutes or less. So this could be valuable if you're only going to be producing jams and jellies, pickles, or salsas, just to name a few examples. So an atmospheric steam canner processes food by surrounding the jars with steam instead of boiling water, like in the boiling water canner. In a steam canner, a rack is put on the bottom of the pan and approximately 2 quarts of water are added. The water should not be higher than the level of the rack. So compared to a boiling water canner, the steam canner uses significantly less water. A boiling water canner, you might need up to 16 quarts of water, while in a steam canner, you might only be using 2 quarts. So because of that, a steam canner takes less time to heat up because there's less water. But then that also means because there's less water when it's boiling, it could evaporate too quickly, which is why we have that processing time maximum of 45 minutes. So the processing time of the food does not change between using a boiling or a steam water canner. That's the same. Yeah. The processing time starts once there is a steady stream of steam being produced and vented from the canner. So the steam canner has specific vent holes that allow for that stream of steam to flow out. So a large pot can't be used in its place because it's not going to have those same specific holes. Um, and Lauren is sharing a fact sheet about steam canners that was developed by the North Central Food Safety Extension Network that just provides some more information on steam canners. And then the last webinar, it was asked if the links to the resources that we're sharing will be included in the follow-up email. The answer is yes. I'll include all of those if you're not able to save those at this time. The last type of canner is a pressure canner. So a pressure canner is needed to can and process low acid foods. So this method would be used for vegetables that have a pH of greater than 4.6 and proteins. This type of canner is used because a much higher temperature is reached, which is needed to process these foods that have that high pH or they're low acid. A boiling water or a steam canner, they process food at the boiling point of water, so approximately 212 degrees Fahrenheit. A pressure canner, because of the pressure that's created inside the unit, will raise the boiling water temperature to between 240 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And that higher temperature is needed because there's not another food safety control present, like that acidity. Like the other canning methods, a rack is needed in the bottom of the canner. This will allow, again, for that water to circulate around all of the sides of the jars so we don't get any cold spots. The lid on a pressure canner has a gasket and it locks into place. And that's essential for creating that pressure inside the canner, which raises the the temperature of the boiling water. And the required pressure and time for processing different foods are identified in safe recipes. There are two types of pressure canners. There's the weighted gauge and the dial gauge. Regardless of the type of canner, a pressure canner will also always have a safety valve and a vent. The dial gauge pressure canner has a readout for the pressure and a safety counterweight. This canner needs to be routinely checked for accuracy. And if you don't get it checked, you run the risk of under processing a low acid food, which could lead to foodborne illness like botulism. The weighted gauge pressure canner will have weights for 5, 10, or 15 PSI. PSI is pounds per square inch, and it's the unit of measure for pressure. This weight gauge is then put on a vent port and will rattle. There are a variety of brands available for Mason style canning jars like Ball, Kerr, and Knox, to name a few. Regardless of the brand you purchase, you just need to make sure they're specifically designed for canning. This would mean that the glass has been tempered so it can withstand those high temperatures, and it'll also have those threads that'll allow for the lid ring to secure in place. Also, there are many sizes of jars. There's quarts, pints, half pints, quarter pints, and some even larger, like half gallon. The size of the jar you select will depend on the recipe. Different size of jars require different processing times. The Answer Line, which is a collaboration between Iowa State University Extension and University of Minnesota Extension, put together a helpful article about a bunch of different brands of jars, and Lauren is sharing that link in the chat. So a quick review on the anatomy of a jar before we discuss lids. A safe recipe will include instructions for how much headspace to leave in the jar. The headspace is the unfilled space between the food or the liquid level and the lid. The headspace is needed to allow for room for the expansion of the food and the liquid when the jars are being processed. And then it's also important in forming that vacuum when the jars begin to cool. The headspace will vary depending on the food that's being processed. The recipe may call for a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, or even as much as 1 1/4 inches. And then use the right lid and screw band for the jar. You cannot use a lid for a wide mouth jar on a narrow jar, as the lid won't align with the jar opening. The 2-piece lid is what is recommended for use by the National Center for Home Food Preservation and the USDA. The metal lid, or sometimes called the flat, has a plastisol sealing compound in that orange part of the lid. When the plastisol is heated, it forms that airtight seal. And because of this, it's recommended that the metal lid only be used once for canning. You could reuse the lid for a different purpose, like storing dried foods in a jar. The plastisol compound will lose its effectiveness over time. So if you find a package of lids, in the basement or in the back of a drawer, you don't know how long they've been there, it might be better for you to use them for storing other foods like those dried or frozen items, and not for canning. The metal screw band, or sometimes called the ring, can be reused as long as it's not dented or rusty. And the purpose of the metal screw band is to hold that metal lid in place while the jars are being heated. And lastly, these are just some other pieces of equipment that are essential or can make canning easier. So a rack is essential for canning to ensure that water or steam is able to circulate around the jars. You can use ones that come with the kit, or you can make your own by zip tying the metal screw bands together. Jar grabbers are better to use than standard tongs to move jars in and out of the canner. The jar grabbers have a silicone or a gripping material on the end, and that helps to prevent slippage. And then also they tend to have a curve around the gripping end that goes around the jar nicely, again, to prevent slippage. Funnels will allow for jars to be filled a lot easier and minimize spills. And then a plastic headspace tool or a ruler are needed to ensure you're filling the jars to the correct level. The plastic tool can also be used to remove any bubbles from the jar when you're filling. So now let's talk about equipment that is not recommended for canning. And some of this is going to seem intuitive to you, but there are so many unsafe recipes and processes available that recommend some of these tools. So pressure cookers like stovetop pots or devices like Instant Pots are not substitutes for a pressure canner. A pressure cooker is designed for cooking. They're smaller in diameter than pressure canners. They use less water than a pressure canner, resulting in a lesser come up and cool down time compared to a pressure canner, which is both part of that total processing time in a tested recipe. The internal temperature of a pressure cooker fluctuates during rapid heating and cooling, and it does not have a proper mechanism for venting. And while there's some models of the Instapot, I think it's called the Instapot Max, have a canning feature, the National Center for Home Food Preservation does not recommend the use of that type of equipment, these type of pressure cookers for canning, again, as that total processing time is really impacted by the device functionality. So if the processing time is impacted, we might not be destroying any of that. We might not be effectively destroying any bacteria that could be present and lead to that risk of foodborne illness. Canning instructions might be included with some of these pressure cooker devices by manufacturers. But again, since 2015, the USDA and the National Center for Home Food Preservation do not recommend using these pressure cooker devices as a substitute for a pressure canner. Ovens and multi-cookers are not safe methods for canning and processing. They don't have that kind of temperature and pressure control. They're also not safe for sterilizing jars. So good for cooking, not good for canning and processing shelf-stable foods. These types of jars with a rubber gasket are not safe for canning and processing, as this type of jar and gasket are not designed to form a vacuum and an airtight seal. The rubber gasket doesn't minimize the air or the moisture movement into the jar like the two-piece lid would. So this type of jar could be safely used for storing dried or dehydrated foods, storing frozen foods, storing foods that you're going to keep in the refrigerator, but not used for canning and processing. You won't get that seal and that vacuum. These plastic or reusable lids may have canning in the description, but they're not going to perform the same way as that two-piece lid in the canning process. So again, these are okay for packaging and storing your dried foods, frozen foods, things that you're going to keep in the refrigerator, but not for canning and processing shelf-stable foods. And then lastly, these vacuum sealer jars or attachments are not a replacement for the canning and processing procedures of the boiling water bath, the steam or pressure canners. These types of devices can produce a good seal, which can help extend the shelf life, but there's no heat treatment. It's important to understand that this process of sealing the jar creating a vacuum does not result in the same shelf-stable canned food that canning and processing do, because canning and processing have that heat step, and these kind of jars do not have that heat step or that heat treatment. That heat step in canning is important for destroying pathogens and again creating that hermetic or airtight seal. And it's that heating process and that sealing process that makes the food shelf stable. So again, okay for packaging and storing dried foods, frozen foods, things you're going to keep in the refrigerator, but not a replacement for canning and processing shelf-stable foods. Okay, so that is all the information I have. Are there any questions about canning?
There are a few questions in the chat here. One of them asked, what are your thoughts regarding some using a kitchen towel in the bottom of the boiling water canner versus a rack?
A rack is going to be better than a kitchen towel because the rack is going to allow that that water and that steam to, freely move around. There's not going to be a barrier. That kitchen towel, yes, even though it's saturated, it's creating a barrier that is going to prevent movement of water or steam within that canner. So I would not recommend that. I would say, you know, the easiest option was zip tying those rings together and creating your own rack.
And then is there a rule on the age for canners to use? How old is too old?
There's not like a number on the age. It's really going to be about what condition that canner is in. So we can start more complex. So with the pressure canner, if that gasket is not sealing tightly, if you have um the if you have the dial, no, oops. If you have the dial pressure canner, and when you're getting it tested, if it's outside of like a range that can be compensated for in the processing, you're going to want to replace it. If there's like dings or nips or what's the word I'm looking for? Dents. That's the word I'm looking for. If there's dents into the sides of the pots, that could cause there to be very small pinholes, especially if it's a very sharp dent, and it has a point that could cause a pinhole, that will let air leak in and out, impact the pressure. For the boiling water canners, it's, if it has been super worn, again, if there's dents that have pinholes and that it's allowing water or steam to escape, that's when you're going to want to replace it.
And then somebody mentioned their favorite jars are the green jars. Are those safe for canning?
As long as they are tempered and have the tight fitting lid, and they're fine if they're labeled as, for food safe. Yeah, the biggest, that's what you want to look for, is that it's tempered so it can withstand that high temperature, and that it is a food grade product.
And then it looks like somebody's been having issues receiving the emails after the webinars. Do you know when you'll be sending out the email with the links and everything?
Likely Tuesday afternoon sometime next week.
Okay. And then I don't know if you want to just make a note that Judith hasn't been receiving them and make sure she gets it.
Yeah.
It looks like that is all of them. Oh, one more. During COVID, a number of companies, not Ball, began to manufacture reusable lids. What do you think about those?
Yeah, so that's um get to the screen. Of course, it's gonna be one of the last ones there. So that is one of these is an example, these tough lids. They There was some testing done, and there was more seals that failed with the reusable lids. So that's why they're just not recommended by the National Center for Home Food Preservation. I don't remember the exact percentage of lids that were failing to seal, but it was more than the standard two-piece lid.
And it looks like that's all the questions now.
Okay. Well, then in our last couple minutes, like always, really appreciate any feedback you can provide. If you can complete the short questionnaire or evaluation survey, Lauren will put the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. I'll leave that survey open for about a week, week and a half, and I'll include the link in the follow-up email as well. And then just a reminder, if you haven't already registered, excuse me tonight, my mouth is so dry. If you have not registered for any of our future webinars, please consider doing so. You can follow the link or scan the QR code. Next month is jams, jellies, and other fruit spreads. Again, we'll dig into the purpose of each ingredient, from a safety and a quality standpoint, and as well as the different processing steps, like why is this so critical to the safety and quality of your product. And then June will be pickling. And then just a brief thank you to the other extension sources that I borrowed some wonderful pictures from. So with that, thank you. We are done a few minutes early, so I can stay on if there are any other questions.